The phone calls started on a Monday. By Wednesday, every one of them had gone unanswered. 26 American allies, NATO members, Pacific partners, Gulf state partners, were formally contacted by the State Department and asked for military, logistical, or political support for operations against Iran. 26. The number of allies who responded with any form of commitment: 0. Not one formal ally of the United States of America has agreed to stand beside this administration in this conflict. Not publicly, not privately, not on paper, not with a statement. And the NATO alliance, the 75-year-old collective defense architecture that has been the load-bearing wall of Western security since 1949, issued no statement of support, no declaration, no communique. Silence. Complete silence. That silence is not passive. It is a verdict. The United States didn't just fail to build a coalition. The United States asked for one, was refused by every partner it called, and is now conducting military operations in the Middle East with no allied support structure, no shared intelligence framework, no burden-sharing agreement, and no political cover from the international community that the last 75 years of American foreign policy was designed to build and maintain. Every adversary in the world heard that silence. Every one of them is adjusting their calculations right now. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly how 26 formal requests produced 0 commitments, sourced from diplomatic cables confirmed by the Financial Times and independently verified by Reuters correspondents in Brussels and Riyadh. I am going to show you what allies told American diplomats privately that they would never say publicly, and why what they said is more alarming than the refusals themselves. And I am going to tell you why the world you are living in right now is measurably more dangerous than it was 30 days ago. Not because Iran is stronger than we thought, but because America is more alone than it has ever been in a crisis since the Second World War. The alliance didn't break overnight, but it broke, and the evidence is in the silence. Imagine you have spent 30 years building a business network, partners in every major market, relationships built on mutual benefit, shared risk, common rules. The whole network functions because everyone trusts that when one member of the network is in trouble, the others will stand up. That trust is the product. That trust is worth more than any single contract. Now imagine one member of the network, the largest one, the one everyone else has organized around, starts making decisions that expose the other members to risk they didn't agree to take, breaks the rules they all wrote together, dismisses the process by which disputes get resolved, and then, when that member gets into serious trouble, turns to the rest of the network and says, "Now I need you to stand with me." Hold that thought, because that is exactly what the State Department asked 26 allies to do last Monday, and 26 allies said no. Drop your answer in the comments. Did America's allies abandon us in a moment of genuine need? Or did American foreign policy over the last 3 years make it rational for allies to protect themselves by staying out? Both answers have serious implications. Let us rewind the clock. This didn't start with the Iran strikes. It started 3 years ago, in a series of decisions that, individually, could each be explained away. Collectively, they rewrote the terms of what it means to be an American ally. It started with the tariff war against Canada and the European Union. Allies, not adversaries, targeted with economic weapons that the rules-based international trading system explicitly prohibits between partners. It continued with the withdrawal of American support from the International Criminal Court, the World Health Organization, and the Paris Climate Accord, institutions that American allies had structured significant portions of their own domestic and foreign policy around. It escalated with the public suggestion made by the President of the United States at a NATO summit that America might not honor Article 5, the collective defense guarantee that is the entire foundational premise of the alliance, for members who did not meet specific defense spending thresholds. And it culminated, 6 months ago, in the unilateral withdrawal of American intelligence sharing protocols with several European partners, following a leak investigation that named no foreign source and produced no prosecution. The Trump administration's entire alliance management strategy was built on one catastrophic assumption: that American allies would absorb any level of pressure, any volume of public humiliation, any breach of institutional norms, and still show up when the United States needed them. Because the alternative, standing outside the American security umbrella, was too frightening to contemplate. Every diplomat who has spent a career working with American partners knew that assumption was wrong. Every ally had a limit, and the administration crossed every limit, one by one, without ever asking what the cumulative cost would be. The answer to that question arrived last Monday. In 26 phone calls that nobody answered the way Washington needed them to answer. Receipt number 1. The Brussels cables. Hat tip to the Financial Times, which obtained and published a summary of internal European Union diplomatic assessments circulated among member states in the 72 hours following the State Department's coalition requests. The cables, confirmed by Reuters correspondents in Brussels who independently verified their authenticity with 3 EU diplomatic sources, document what European partners said to each other privately after declining to commit to the American request. The language is precise, institutional, and devastating. One cable, from a senior German diplomatic official, describes the American request as arriving without prior consultation, without a defined operational objective, without a legal framework compatible with international law, and without acknowledgement of the alliance damage that preceded it. Now stop right there. That sentence is not one country expressing frustration. That sentence is a checklist, a documented list of exactly what the United States failed to provide before asking its oldest allies to risk their own security and standing to join a military operation. No prior consultation, no defined objective, no legal framework, no acknowledgement of prior damage. The Germans were not refusing out of cowardice. They were refusing because the basic conditions for Allied participation, the conditions the United States itself established in every coalition it has ever built, were not met. A second cable from France describes the request as one that asks for commitments in exchange for nothing, under a framework built by none, toward an objective defined by one. That is not an ally refusing to help. That is an ally telling you exactly what you failed to do before you asked. Receipt number 2. The private warnings. Here is the part that should make your blood boil. This is not the first time Allied partners told the administration that its approach to coalition management was producing irreversible damage. According to reporting by Politico Europe, confirmed by 2 former State Department officials who served in the current administration before resigning, Allied governments delivered formal diplomatic warnings, not back-channel suggestions, formal written warnings, to the State Department on 4 separate occasions over the past 18 months, alerting Washington that continued unilateral action and public alliance pressure would compromise the ability of Allied governments to support American operations when support was genuinely needed. 4 warnings. 4 formal, written diplomatic warnings delivered through official channels signed by Allied foreign ministries, telling the State Department exactly what would happen. The administration did not respond to the first warning, did not change course after the second, did not convene an alliance review after the third. After the fourth, the State Department reportedly sent a reply describing the warnings as, quote, misunderstanding American negotiating posture. The government was told 4 times, in writing, by its own allies, that this moment was coming. It told them they were misreading the situation. That is not a diplomatic failure. That is an institution that decided it already knew everything worth knowing, and paid for that certainty with 26 unanswered requests on the most important week of a military conflict. If this channel is assembling this picture in a way you have not seen anywhere else, the Brussels cables, the 4 written warnings, and what they mean for what comes next, you are now ahead of the vast majority of people trying to understand what is actually happening in this alliance. The 3 scenarios for where this goes and the specific ways it reaches your finances and your security are the most important part of this conversation. Subscribe right now. The Allied response to the Congressional War Powers debate and whether any NATO member formally distances itself from the American position is the next chapter, and it is moving. Do not miss it. Now compare the reality of 26 refusals to what the administration is actually saying in public. At a press conference 3 days after the coalition requests went unanswered, the Secretary of State was asked directly, has any formal American ally committed to supporting operations against Iran? The response was, and this is a direct quote, America has never needed permission from foreign governments to defend its interests, and we are not going to start asking for it now. The reporter was not asking about permission. The reporter was asking about allies. The secretary was asked, "Are they with us?" He answered, "We don't need them. Those are not the same question." And the fact that the secretary answered the question that was not asked, while the one that was asked hung in the air, tells you exactly how the administration is processing 26 refusals. When a second reporter followed up and asked whether NATO's silence represented a fracture in the alliance, the secretary said, "NATO remains the strongest military alliance in the history of the world." NATO issued no statement supporting the American position, and his analysis is that the strongest alliance in history is fully intact, while the foreign ministries of its member states are quietly circulating cables describing the American request as incompatible with international law. These are not serious people managing a serious alliance. These are performers reading prepared statements to a room full of cameras, while the architecture they inherited crumbles behind the backdrop. Here is the part that should keep every serious strategist in Washington awake at night. Receipt number 3. What the silence signals to Beijing. The most significant consequence of 26 Allied refusals is not what it means for the Iran conflict. It is what it means for the Taiwan Strait. China's military and foreign policy establishment has been running a continuous assessment of one specific question for the last 4 years. If China moves on Taiwan, will the American alliance system hold? Will Japan commit? Will Australia commit? Will South Korea hold? Will European partners provide economic and political solidarity, even if they cannot provide direct military support? The entire deterrence model in the Pacific, the reason China has not acted, rests on the assumption that the answer to all of those questions is yes. Last Monday, 26 American allies answered a similar question with a uniform no. According to analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, confirmed in a public assessment published this week, Chinese foreign ministry officials have already cited the Allied refusals in internal communications as evidence of what one document described as the accelerating dissolution of the American hub-and-spoke alliance architecture. That phrase, hub-and-spoke, is the academic term for the system where every ally connects to Washington rather than to each other. China is not celebrating the refusals. China is studying them, documenting them, feeding them into the model that will eventually produce a decision about Taiwan. Every refusal is a data point. Every silence from NATO is a calibration. The deterrence model in the Pacific did not collapse last Monday, but it lost credibility in a way that does not restore itself because the Iran conflict eventually ends. The Allied silence did not shrink America's isolation. It advertised it to the one audience America most needed not to see it. Exactly as every career diplomat who delivered one of those 4 written warnings said it would. There is one image from this week that captures the entire story. On one side, the American Secretary of State at a podium in Washington, suit pressed, flags behind him, voice steady, declaring that America acts on its own authority and has never needed permission from anyone. Forceful, sovereign, alone. On the other side, the European Council chamber in Brussels, foreign ministers of 27 nations seated in a horseshoe, reviewing the cables, discussing their response. Not to the Iran conflict, not to the American military operation, but to each other. Building frameworks, talking to each other, deciding what European strategic autonomy looks like in a world where American reliability can no longer be assumed. One side is performing independence, the other side is building it. One side is declaring that allies are unnecessary, the other side is quietly proving it. Trump performs strength from a podium. European foreign ministers build alternatives in a chamber. Trump demands loyalty without offering predictability. The allies choose predictability over loyalty. Trump governs by declaration. The alliance responds with documentation. Trump calls the alliance the strongest in history. The alliance calls the request incompatible with law. Trump answers the question he wanted to be asked. His partners answer the question that was actually asked. One side is staging confidence. The other side is restructuring around its absence. So what does this actually mean for you? Not for foreign policy professionals, for the person watching this. If you work in defense manufacturing, in aerospace, in advanced weapons systems, in the industrial base that builds what the military deploys, the Allied refusals have a direct contractual consequence. For decades, the most cost-efficient American defense production model has included Allied co-production agreements, shared manufacturing, and interoperability contracts that spread the cost and the supply chain across multiple NATO partners. Those agreements require a functioning alliance relationship to renew. According to data published by the Defense News Budget Tracker, 12 active co-production contracts, worth a combined $7.8 billion, come up for renewal in the next 18 months. If the alliance fracture deepens, those contracts do not automatically renew. The jobs connected to them do not automatically stay. If you hold any retirement savings tied to defense or aerospace sector funds, and most broad market 401k allocations have exposure to this sector, the market has not yet priced in the scenario where allied co-production collapses. It has priced in a short-term defense spending boost. It has not priced in the long-term structural cost of building and maintaining a military capability that was designed to be shared and must now be carried alone. That recalculation, when it comes, will not be gentle. If you live in a NATO member state, or if you are an American who has always understood the bedrock promise of that alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all, the administration's response to the Allied refusals is telling you something important about how that commitment is being managed right now. Article 5 is a treaty obligation. It does not disappear because the Secretary of State says America does not need permission. But treaty obligations require political will to enforce, and political will is exactly what is being depleted, withdrawal by withdrawal, tariff by tariff, unanswered warning by unanswered warning. If you are a veteran of any conflict, any theater, any era, you know that the reason American soldiers have been able to accomplish what they have accomplished is not American military power alone. It is American military power plus the intelligence, the logistics, the overflight rights, the forward basing, the political legitimacy that Allied partnership provides. 26 refusals do not just leave America isolated diplomatically. They leave the soldiers currently operating in that theater without the support architecture that keeps them safer and makes the mission more achievable. The administration's response to the refusals is that America does not need permission. The service members in the field need more than permission. They need partners. The administration did not lose Allied support because the Allies are weak. It lost Allied support because it spent 3 years making Allied support structurally irrational, and then expressed surprise when Allies behaved rationally. Here is the hard truth. The Allied governments who refused last Monday did not want to refuse. France, Germany, the United Kingdom, Japan. These are not governments looking for reasons to distance themselves from American leadership. They are governments that spent years absorbing pressure, weathering public humiliation, managing domestic political consequences of standing beside an administration that repeatedly treated them as obstacles rather than partners. They did not refuse because they oppose American interests. They refused because the accumulated cost of compliance finally exceeded the accumulated cost of refusal. And they made that calculation individually, 26 of them, and arrived at the same answer. The administration did not lose this coalition on Monday morning. It lost it over 3 years of decisions that were each individually defensible and collectively catastrophic. Where does this go from here? I see 3 paths. The first is the repair path, a diplomatic reset, a formal Allied consultation process, a multilateral framework for the Iran operation, a public acknowledgement from Washington that partners were not adequately consulted, produces a partial coalition within 30 to 60 days. 2 or 3 key allies, primarily in the Gulf, provide logistical support and intelligence sharing. NATO does not formally endorse the operation, but quietly provides coordination through existing channels. The operation proceeds with thin but real Allied involvement. But even in this best case, even if France and Germany quietly rejoin the framework, the cables are already written. The documentation of what allies said to each other in private is already in the historical record. Every future Allied partner, every future foreign ministry, every future negotiation will have access to what was said in those Brussels cables when America asked for help and was turned away. The repair path ends the immediate isolation. It does not erase the precedent. The second path is the fracture path. This is the scenario that should genuinely alarm every serious analyst of Western security. European allies, led by France and Germany, accelerate the Strategic Autonomy Project, the European Union's effort to build an independent defense capability that does not require American participation to function. They fast-track procurement decisions. They deepen bilateral defense agreements with each other rather than through NATO. They begin coordinating on intelligence outside American frameworks. Japan and South Korea, watching the European response, quietly begin their own hedging, increasing bilateral security cooperation with each other, diversifying away from sole dependence on American guarantees. Within 5 years, the alliance does not collapse. It becomes optional. And once an alliance becomes optional, the collective defense guarantee that made it valuable is gone. The fracture path does not end with a formal announcement. It ends with a structure that looks like an alliance but functions like a polite fiction. The third path is the unraveling. This is the one nobody wants to say out loud. China moves. Not on Taiwan. Not yet. On something smaller. A disputed maritime feature in the South China Sea. A provocation precisely calibrated to test whether the alliance fracture that produced 26 refusals on Iran extends to the Pacific. If America responds alone, China has its answer. If America asks for allied support and gets the same silence it got last Monday, China has its answer faster. The deterrence model that has kept the Pacific stable for 70 years depends on uncertainty, on the possibility that China cannot calculate the exact allied response to a provocation. Last Monday removed a significant portion of that uncertainty. You would normally say that no rational actor would exploit a moment like this so directly. But the actors who are watching this are not operating on normal assumptions anymore, and there are no more guardrails. Here is what I know for certain. Regardless of which path this takes, regardless of whether the Allies return to the framework or the fracture deepens, the moment when 26 formal partners said no to the United States of America is now in the historical record. Every foreign ministry in the world has read the cables. Every adversary has filed the data point. Every allied government has documented its own response and the reasoning behind it. Even if the administration announces a coalition next week, even if 3 Gulf states sign a cooperation agreement and Washington calls it a triumph, the strategic calculation that produced the refusals does not change because a press release says the alliance is strong. The cables already say otherwise. Once allies document that it is rational to refuse, that documentation does not get classified. It becomes the template for the next time. The Secretary of State says America does not need permission. 26 allies said something simpler. We are not asking for your permission either. And that response, quiet, documented, unanimous, is more consequential than any single military development in this conflict. Because military situations can be reversed. Battles can be won after they are lost. Territory can be retaken. But the moment when the most powerful alliance in human history stops functioning as a collective and starts functioning as a set of individual calculations, that moment does not get walked back with a communique or a summit photo. The 3 to 5 week timelines fail. The coalition requests go unanswered. The cables get written. And slowly, without a formal announcement, without a dramatic rupture, the world reorganizes around the new reality. Right now, the alliance that America's security has rested on for 75 years is being rebuilt without America at its center. Not by adversaries, by the partners we spent 3 years telling we did not need. I want to leave you with 2 questions. Drop your answers below. I read all of them, and they shape what this channel covers next. Did the allies who refused America's coalition request fail the Western Alliance? Or did the Western Alliance fail them first, and last Monday was simply the invoice arriving? And when the flag-draped coffins come home from a conflict that no ally was willing to share the cost of, when those families bury their sons and daughters in a war America fought completely alone, will the people who called Allied concern about consultation weakness, who said other nations were freeloaders, who cheered every time this administration humiliated a partner publicly, will they still say the isolation was worth it? Drop your answers in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe because the NATO emergency session being requested by 3 member states, and whether it produces a formal statement that could publicly break the alliance's silence, is coming within days. This story is not slowing down. Do not look away.